So yeah, my name's Evan. I'm not sure if you guys can see Leanne's video feed right now. She's standing a bit further away, but it's for a good reason, because yesterday is June 3rd, and yes, I am standing in 2 or 3 centimeters of snow that has fallen in Churchill last night. So if you can believe that, that's what we're up against right now. But yeah, I wanted to start out here to get a really good vision of the facility from the outside, and some of the very unique features that we may have in the facility in Churchill and in Polar Bear country. So a really great sort of welcome to the CNSC with our bear bars right on the front door right here. Also a few bear bars down below underneath the windows that you can see as well. And one really intentional feature that you can probably see quite easily here is there's a really nice ditch or a trench that's dug well below the facility here, below these windows. And that's a really, really important sort of bear safe criteria for us, so that bears, if they are up close to the window, can't really get too high or too close and up to push against those windows. And the other great thing that you can also see from this perspective is that the building is actually raised. So you can see underneath you have a bit of the fencing for wildlife under there, and just raised on the piles as well. So I just wanted to start out here to show folks a really, really great vantage point of what that looks like with our facility here. And yeah, some of those unique polar bear country features that exist. And maybe one other thing I would just point out too is our mandate on the side of the building here is to understand and sustain the North. We'll chat a little bit about that in a minute or two, but just yeah, I wanted to start out here to give you guys a great perspective. But come on in and we'll get warm, because it's actually kind of cold out here. Okay.
It was too cold for it.
No worries. Wondering if everyone can see this now. I think one of our devices died with the cold weather. So yeah, we'll just start here. I'll switch my video around. Perfect.
This way?
Sorry, the other way.
Oh, got it.
So yeah, we're just going to start in like A shape here and just chat a little bit about the CNSC, who we are, what we do. So we're an independent, non-for-profit research station. We started around 1976, actually in the town of Churchill, which is about 23 kilometers that way, down the only highway up here. My understanding was that there was a need for a real science space in and around Churchill with researchers and folks coming up. So that was 76 to 85, we were in town, and then in 85 to move here to the site that we're on right now. Our two main pillars we focus on are both research and education. And so that takes very different shapes depending on what kind of group is up here or folks are coming to visit. So with research, we host and facilitate logistics for researchers to come up. We do field courses. We have a lot of Earthwatch team with citizen scientists. And then with the education side, we have school groups, the public come up as part of a learning vacation, we call it. And it's a small revenue stream for us to tap into that tourism market that exists in Churchill. One of the great things about the CNSC too that I really love is that we're a totally independent non-for-profit. So what that means is we generate our own revenue, obviously, and got quite a bit of freedom to play with, how we want to do things. We don't have any large funding or associations with, say, a university, for example, and the mandates that come with that university. So I really appreciate having that flexibility here as an employee. Speaking of employees, I would say in our peak season, around the fall and polar bear season, we've got about 23 employees. And then in the lower visitation times in Churchill, there's really sort of an ebb and flow to people coming to Churchill. That low season is probably about 9 to 10 employees at most. So we really sort of breathe with the seasons of Churchill. Getting this facility here. So this facility had a grand opening in August of 2011. We are also a LEED certified facility, which you can probably see on the wall here. We'll chat a bit about some of those features in a few minutes, hopefully. But yeah, just wanted to give a very brief overview of the CNSC here. Maybe we'll head through the cafeteria now.
Yeah, we just need to stand a little closer together so they can hear
okay.
you on the phone. So this is good.
This is good? Okay, cool.
Yeah,
so
yep.
We're good to walk? So yeah, this is our cafeteria space in here. Obviously sort of like shared meals. We can probably host I think we probably had about 100 people in the cafeteria before, and that's probably every chair we have in our facility plus a few along the wall there. Those peak times of visitation would be probably in the fall, October, November, but for the most part, this is a great public space. It can be converted to also be a meeting or a conference facility, this room here. When we had our 40th anniversary gala a few years ago, we had a nice sort of shirt and tie, which is a pretty big deal in Churchill, shirt and tie event in here. So had a stage and things like that, but it's a great multi-purpose room in here that serves as our cafeteria about 364 days of the year. But we'll head on up now. It's kind of at the very far end of the building, if anybody's trying to orient themselves. So the far east side of the building. We're entering what I call the red light district. No, I'm just kidding. But the red lights are a great addition for folks coming up to do amateur astronomy or Northern Lights tourism. And so the red lights do allow us to sort of illuminate the stairwell in here, but won't ruin any photos. I'm not too sure how the Wi-Fi is going to be out here, but we'll take one quick step to our observation deck out here. It's very windy, obviously, but one of the really key things for us in designing this building was that we needed a safe place for guests and visitors to be outside. Obviously, being in polar bear country, we need to have people who will be called polar bear guards, who are an armed guard, but we can't always provide that at all times. So this is a second-story floating deck, essentially, which gives a awesome view, sort of the boreal forest and tundra transition out here, but just a great space for folks to get outside. It's a grid design, which is very intentional for this deck as well as the one below, so that all of the snow can pass through and then be swept away. So as I mentioned earlier, with the building being raised, all that snow can actually move away. And that was another very intentional design, because there are some awesome stories of the old building next door, the old study center, of polar bears on the roof because of all the snow drifts. So when we designed this building, we said no polar bears on the roof. One of the really great features out here as well is all of our exterior lights are actually pointed down and have the shields on them to reduce a lot of light pollution for astronomy, but also for migratory birds that pass through Churchill. Usually in the spring, maybe not so many today with the snow, but they're almost going to be here. One other highlight I just wanted to touch on briefly was this large panel right here. So it's passively heating the air that would be moved in for our HVAC system. So that would be, I think there's only 3 rooms in the whole facility that have any sort of climate control in them or AC. So this is passively heating a lot of that air into the building. And it's a cost savings for us, because obviously in the north, one of the largest costs is to heating a facility. And so if we can reduce those costs with a very simple installation like this passive wall panel right here, that's a great addition for us. And also dons our birdfish. That's our logo or mascot unofficially. We'll head into the boardroom now, so it might be a 10-second walk, so bear with us.
They wanted me to rotate it, but it didn't seem to rotate for that. So.
I think my lock is on for rotation.
It did rotate on the.
Okay.
Leanne, if the rotation is locked on the device, that's probably what happened.
Yeah, it's not actually. So when I rotate it, it does rotate on the screen, but it looks like you guys can't see that rotation.
Yeah, that's right.
So is it okay otherwise though? Like even though it's a smaller.
It's okay. It's just that we're losing the panorama. When Evan was out on the porch there, we didn't get to really see the whole side of the building and stuff like that. We're losing a bit, but that's okay.
Yeah, apologies. I was on Zoom calls all morning, and my device died in the cold outside while we're waiting.
So just a couple quick points to highlight in this room here. So our boardroom. If you kind of look right here, this timber is slanted a little bit, so it's higher at the top and narrower at the bottom, just like an umbrella essentially. And so in Churchill, we have many hours of sunlight in the summer months. and very few hours of sunlight in the winter months. And so when the sun is high in the sky for many, many hours in the summer, with the building being wider at the top, like that umbrella, we can keep it a bit more shaded and cooler on the inside. And then when we've got sun in the winter around the horizon for maybe a few hours of the day, at best, that sun can come in the facility and keep things a little bit warmer as well. One of my favorite features that I love to talk about in this facility here is that you can see we've got these awesome triple pane windows here. And we estimate that about 90% of our facility can be lit with natural light only, which is awesome in the summer months of so many hours of daylight, and to have so many large lit with natural light really feels feels great. Also, if you have a look here at the window wells, you can see they're actually quite wide, quite thick. We have 8-inch thick styrofoam insulation on our
hand there again.
Pardon me?
Just put your hand in front of it again.
Oh,
so
right here, sorry. So quite wide, you can see right here. We have an R value of 44, both in the walls and in the roof as well. So we're pretty proud of that. One of the other really small things that I talk about to some of the folks on this tour is I never really thought about this until I worked here, but there's 2 light switches for 2 light panels on the roof, and that's it. So if you think of like a university, for example, where you hit one light switch and 6 or 7 different light panels go on, that's not a great use of energy. So there's one light switch for each panel, which is a really simple, low-cost installation when building the building, but saves a lot of money in the long run. The other really cool thing I love to talk about in this room here is right here. We have our CO2 detector. So right now we're reading about 580 parts per million. It'll probably go up because I'm right here talking. Yep, 613. And so, as I said at the very beginning of the tour, there's a real ebb and flow and sort of in visitation and people coming to Churchill. So in the fall, we could have a full building for 6 weeks, and then in December and January, we could have 8 or 9 staff, and that's it, no visitors. So you can close this door to this room, and there's very little CO2 being detected in here, and this is plugged into our HVAC system. And so that's just really reducing the need to have all that energy consuming the HVAC system 12 months of the year. So as the seasons of Churchill breathe, so does our building sort of breathe with us as well. So one of the really cool things that I didn't know much about until I started working here, but yeah, let's talk about that one as well. And if anyone wants to see, you won't see a polar bear now, but there is a polar bear right here as well. So a very unique to Churchill feature. We'll head down to the Aurora Dome now. It's one of my favorite rooms, I think, in the whole facility.
Might just do a shot from up here. Just
sure. Awesome. So some of you probably know this, but the best time to see the Northern Lights in Churchill is in the winter months, when it's sometimes -50, which is really friggin' cold. And so when we created this facility and designed it, we wanted to have the Aurora Dome up here. So it's essentially like a bubble, think of it, on the top of the building. So it provides a warm and a safe place to see the Northern Lights in the winter months. It also provides a pretty phenomenal, we could go up. Pretty phenomenal view of the tundra and boreal forest around here. So, quick look. So this is, I think, probably the second. I think there's only 2 buildings in Churchill that have a 3rd floor. So this is our 3rd floor that we're on right now. But yeah, if Leanne's kind of panning around, you can see it's a great perspective of the rocket range behind me here, and then all of the tundra and boreal forest transition behind us here. Just a great vantage point. We oftentimes, sometimes if there's a polar bear immediately around the facility, we'll use this as a vantage point for someone to be sort of on lookout if there's a bear within, a kilometer or 2, and it's a good chance to see it from a safe distance. But this is probably my favorite feature of the whole facility up here, is to wake up in your bed 10 steps away, come up here, see the Northern Lights, wow, and be in your pajamas the whole time. So it's a pretty great feature of our facility. But yeah, I digress. We'll maybe head down and go to the dormitory and chat a bit about what it's like to stay here for a few nights.
Do you want to talk about the curve beam while we're in here? Just as a great place to start, or do you do that later? Okay.
Oh, you mean the glue line?
Yeah.
Yeah. One quick point that Leanne mentioned too is this is all timbers from southern Manitoba. That's a glue lamp construction. So they were all pre-shaped, and essentially it's a much smaller timbers. They're clamped together, and the glue was injected into them. This actually serves structurally for the facility as well, and I also really appreciate all these exposed timbers. There's 2 in every single dorm room. They're in all the meeting rooms as well. My office, everyone's office, it's a really, really cool feature to have as well. So I love that. Some people ask jokingly, why don't you use local timbers? And if you look out the window, we can't really use local timbers because these trees are pretty skinny and there's a lot of tundra out there, so you couldn't really use those local materials, let alone for a tree house besides, you know, a research facility. So that's what these are. But yeah, we'll go to the dorm now.
Yeah.
Good. Great. So we're in our dormitory right now. We have 21 rooms in total, plus 4 individual staff rooms down here. As you'll see in a moment, each room has 2 bunk beds. So that's 4 people in a room. So 84 is about our capacity in here. One of the things I love to talk about in the dormitory, though, is our water consumption and water use. So we do truck in our water sort of in the late spring, summer, and fall from a nearby lake, about 3.5-ish kilometers just down the road, called Round It on site. So we're obviously very conscious of our water consumption up here. So we have some very intentional fixtures that we've installed to reduce water consumption. So we have the low flow taps for washing hands, low flow push button showers as well, to really just not give folks the option to have a nice high water pressure shower as well. We have dual flush toilets, and then we also have compost toilets as well to help reduce water consumption. And I make a joke that we always rotate an out of order sign on each shower to help reduce showers as well. But we actually, anyway, some people find that that one good. And then the other one that I love too is our sanitizer in the cafeteria. It's a couple cycles for that sanitizer, but one of the cycles we reuse that water once. And so reusing it once cuts consumption totally in half for us. So we're pretty proud of that. When we were sort of measuring water consumption, we estimate somewhere around 80 to 85 liters of water per person per day is about our average when we've got people staying in the dorm using it, especially in our peak season of the fall there. And the North American average just a few years ago was about 325 liters of water per person, well below that North American average for sure. Stepping into the dorm here just for 1 second, just to showcase a little bit about what it looks like to stay here. So, you know, very, very adequate. There's 2 bunk beds, but then also some really small features. So I don't know if you can see on the wall here, but there's a small table or platform for devices. And then there's 2 plugs beside each one to charge devices that people might need. There's individual reading lights that everybody has with a small dome on top to sort of direct that light downwards as well. We've got hooks on the end of the bed, and then these ladders actually move and then mount onto the bed frame for better use of the floor plan in the room. So although this might be at first glance a smaller space, it's really, really well used, plus the desk here as well, and a few chairs. So and my truck outside, so a few things like that. But yeah, it's a very, very good use of a space in here, and the beams are always very nice to have. So, and then I guess lastly too is each guest does have one small wardrobe for whatever they might need. Typically, people coming here in the education side of things would be probably no more than a week. Some researchers can be anywhere from a day to 3 or 4 months. So it really depends. But yeah, I think it's a pretty adequate space for a remote northern research station. We'll head down here and go through the lab and then talk a bit about waste.
Just gonna pause in the bathroom here for a second.
Sure, yeah. We can show people a compost toilet if they want. Yeah. Hope no one's in here. So we always indicate to our guests, because if you actually look, this is one of our compost toilets right here, and some of our guests, they come to me and say, I don't know where the compost toilet is. So we have these signs to say, I'm a compost toilet, use me, making fertilizer, and it's pretty simple. Right there. And then yeah, the low flow taps, so it's just a push button, and it's probably about 15 or 20 seconds per push of water, and not a very high rate of flow as well. So it's about to run out, maybe. You get the point. Just show the showers quickly.
Sure, I didn't turn the light on.
Yeah. This is just one of our shower stalls. So there's, I think there's 10 or 11 stalls in total up here. So. Great. So this is now our lab space. We're at the very other end of the building now. Anyone trying to follow along? One of the things I love to talk about here as well is the flow of the design here. So if you kind of just look down here, we've got the really wide double doors for the researchers, and this is sort of a mudroom area, you could call it. They can take off gear, and then they can go up the stairs where we just came down from, or come into the lab to process samples. So just talking about the flow of people moving in and out of the building, this is a really, really great design feature that I think demonstrates pretty well the thought process that went into the design of the building here. In our lab space here, it's really quiet right now, you know, early spring obviously, but for the most part, when it's busy in the summer months, you would have researchers on different benches down here processing samples, but we mostly support logistics for researchers and host them here. But this is where they would be for the most part around here. But the fume hoods, the ovens are minus 81-degree freezer right now. It's never been quite that cold in Churchill with the wind chill, but it feels like it sometimes for sure. Yeah, sure. We'll just go talk about poop now.
Oh.
So this is one of the 2 compost toilet, I guess, receptacles we have here. So this is what it looks like. So we've got the wood chips in the bottom here with the sort of the collected waste down here. It's a pretty simple design, as most compost toilets are. There's 2, we call them poop chutes, up at the top there, those 2 green tubes. I hope you can see them. And then in here, we've got sort of a cone shape that will form over time. And then about every 6 months, someone draws the short straw, and as a literal shit disturber, they'll grab the poop rake up here and open this door and sort of move things around and give it some time to process, I guess. But yeah, this is one of our 2 receptacles here with the worms inside as well. So we'll go to the biofilter now if you want.
Oh, didn't turn that light on.
Great. So these are our two Waterloo biofilters. One of the great things to talk about here as well is sort of waste and water management. So the study center being so far away from the community of Churchill where waste and water exists, we would spend probably about $25,000 a year before we had this facility, $25,000 a year, just in fuel to take sewage to town and bring water out here. So when we wanted to think about installing sort of our own on-site waste treatment like this, that was one of our ideas, as well as bringing water in from the nearby lake. So these are our two, as I said, biofilters. We've got these sponges that just act as the host for bacteria in here. There's going to be raw effluent sprayed on the top about every 90 seconds. And then we've got these two tanks, and there's also a holding tank that's below the kitchen as well. And for the most part, this is adequate for what we would call our peak use. And so essentially from springtime, when we've got a few researchers coming in, and then all of summer, we'll have lots of researchers, folks coming up for beluga whales, Arctic ecology, and then well into the fall for polar bears. And I'd say it's probably about 80% of our visitors come in those sort of peak 5 or 6 months. And then the other months, when this is all frozen and we can't really use the system or get water from the lake nearby, we will truck it in or take sewage to town, but it's a pretty minimal cost considering we've only got about 50% of visitors coming in those months, and usually only February and March. So yeah, these are the biofilters. And then one other thing I love to showcase here is these are our two hot water tanks, just these two for the whole facility. One of the things I really appreciate too is they're not overly large. In my opinion, I don't know a lot about hot water tanks, but some people always ask, like, how do those two hot water tanks supply the whole facility? And it's super simple. Just there's a low demand for hot water. We have the low flow showers and taps, and so that just really creates a not super high demand for super hot water. And if someone complains about not having a hot shower, I remind them that they're the remote or the research station, and they saw a polar bear yesterday, and life's pretty good. So that's my comeback to them. I think we'll maybe go to the library now, and Leanna can get set up and have a bit more of a formal Q&A if folks do have some burning questions. I'm sure you do. Let's do there.
Just want to turn the camera on too.
Yeah. Cool. So yeah, I think we're happy to field questions at this point now. If anybody's got them, we're on a mobile device. So maybe Laura, can you just yell them at us?
Yeah, I absolutely can. And we can either leave all of our cameras off, or maybe we can turn them all on so we can see people. What if folks, who wants to turn their camera on? Welcome. There we go. Look at all these nice humans. All right. So are there any questions that anybody wants to ask? And we do have some of the people who helped design the buildings also on the call, so they're going to be able to pipe up some too. Oh, look at all these nice faces. Thank you.
Yeah, good shout out to, that must be Melissa from Prairie, who's been adding lots of things into the chat as well. Hi, Melissa.
All right, we've got a question about the HVAC. Do you want to just ask your question? So the question is, can Evan explain with the HVAC system when he was talking about the building breathing?
Sure, actually, maybe I'll answer that one because I actually help take care of the HVAC system a little more than Evan does. So the building for the heating, ventilation, and air conditioning is actually really segmented. So in the lab, we have a separate ventilation system in that end of the building. We didn't take time to show the fume hoods that we have. So those fume hoods, they get exhausted in the chemical cabinets right outside. So you don't do any heat recovery on those. But in the other lab space, we have an HRV unit or an ERV unit in the lab that helps to strip heat out of the air before we let it outside and helps to preheat the incoming air. So that's the ventilation in the lab. And we have 2 spaces in the lab that actually have air conditioning. So we don't air condition the whole building. We just have 2 small air conditioning units for researchers that are trying to do experiments where they need to keep a constant temperature. Because honestly, we only need air conditioning in a short period of the time. The rest of the building, so the dormitories, the cafeteria, well, the cafeteria has a few systems in it, but the main dormitory and some of our classrooms, it has another ERV unit. And so as Evan mentioned, that is a variable flow system. So the motion sensors in the room increase the speed of the ventilation fans, and then that CO2 sensor will, once it gets over 1,000 ppms in the room, it will call for more air to be diffused into those particular rooms. So there's kind of the background ventilation that's happening all the time, and then there's a motion sensor which will ramp up the fans, and then also the CO2 sensor in a particular room, which, and it's fairly simple. It just opens a damper in the ventilation in the roof that just allows more air to come in from the main ventilation system. So we didn't take you actually into those HVAC spaces. One, you have to climb up a rail or a stairway, a ladder to get up to it for the lab. And the other one's, it's a very tiny, small room. So we weren't sure that we could give a good indication of what that looks like. And we also can use the windows to ventilate. So I always like to include those in our HVAC system. If you don't like the temperature, you can open the window.
Yeah. Oh, we've got somebody trying to talk who, okay, sorry.
No, I just said great, thanks for explaining.
Amazing. So we've got another question coming in about the bubble. So was the debate, was there a debate about the viewing bubble? It's awesome, but there must be a lot of heat loss. I guess triple glazed bubble was not an option.
Yeah. So you can probably give more of the science background to it, but one of the big issues we find is that, especially in the winter months when it's really, really cold up here and people are just breathing in the facility, that dome can get quite fogged. So we have the door to that room closed at all times. There's actually a pretty large fan pointed right up at the dome as well that we can plug in if we need to. And then there's a few smaller fans kind of just at the very top of the spiral staircase there that will keep the air circulating. But the reality is that, yeah, when there's 8 people up there all going, wow, 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 it gets a little fogged and a little icy. So we manage it pretty closely, and we polish it maybe once or twice a year if we can, with like some Maguire's car wax and a few odd things like that. But yeah, we actually had a guest one time who stole like an ice scraper out of one of our vehicles and tried to like scrape the ice off the dome. So we now in our guest safety briefing say, don't scrape the dome. So it's a challenge. It's just another thing about living up in Churchill. We just deal with it.
And we were limited on the size of the dome. You may have noticed when we were up there, like it is pretty tight. Evan mentioned, you know, maybe 6 or 8 people up there in that dome. We were constrained on the size by cost. Really, once you go bigger than that, it starts to get really expensive. If you think of like the fish tanks at the casino, those are so big and custom in Winnipeg. And then also to ship it here as a complete unit and have it not have something happen to it. So we were all very much like, I hope the dome gets here in one piece.
Yeah.
Totally. Melissa, did you have anything to add to that from like your memory and perspective?
Only that it was a design feature right from the beginning, and it was something very important to the center. So we had to sort of work around some of the challenges, but I think it turned out good.
Ha! Thumbs up for that. Yeah. All right. So there's a question about how the operational cost has changed since the renovations: the heat, the electricity, the sewer, the water, etc.
Yeah, that's a great question. So one of the choices we made early on was for heating the building that we were going to use electric power. So we heat with just small radiators. Well, we didn't actually show one because they're fairly simple and straightforward. So when you asked that HVAC question, I actually didn't answer the H part, which was yes, we heat with just simple electric kind of baseboard heaters or radiant heaters in different places in the building. And so, as most of you know, hydro costs in Manitoba are pretty inexpensive, but they have gone up in the recent past in particular. And so it is costing us more in terms of being able to operate the building from an electrical perspective. But the great thing is that we are remote, and when we lose power, we have a big backup generator, and it comes on automatically, and that generator then provides power to not all of the building, but most of the building. So we can heat things, we have lights on, and then we have plugs that are coded red if they run on backup generator, or white that don't. Because even if we had a different heating system, we'd still have to have a backup generator. The longest we've had to go is about 3.5 days on backup generator. And just recently we've had to run for like 12 hours on backup generator. So it is something we definitely gave a lot of thought to, in how we would have a redundant power source, a redundant heat source, and make sure that we would have a building that could operate safely. I think the other challenge with operational costs is this is year 9 that we've been in the building. So we're starting now to think about what happens when light bulbs burn out. So operationally, it may, there were definitely a few tweaks that we had to make under the building, but some of those also building maintenance costs are starting to creep up on our operational costs now.
Very real. Very real. Total cost of ownership. There's somebody on this call that loves that conversation, if not more than one. Okay, so there's a question here about the compost and the compost toilet. So what happens to the compost generated from that toilet?
So we've been filling that toilet since August 2011, and neither of the two receptacles have become full yet. So there's probably going to inevitably be a day, like in the next year, where
maybe the next couple months,
someone draws like the shortest possible straw and has to empty that. I think we brainstormed some ideas for it. Like, we do have like a food compost here from the kitchen, but mixing human waste compost and food compost is a challenge.
It could be used as cover on the septic beds that we have out back. So for our wastewater, we showed you the biofilters. So we have holding tanks, and then the liquid effluent gets sprayed into those biofilters, and then from the biofilters it actually goes out to a septic field. So we could use some more cover on those septic beds. We could also use it as cover at the landfill site here in Churchill. Like, those would be 2 potential uses for that composted material. But it's actually, they're so simple to use, and I know maybe Melissa can comment on this too. There was a lot of resistance to composting toilets from some of the building committee members, just because we are a remote facility, and those composting toilet bins have to take up space inside our facility. So they're actually taking up footprint space to be heated, and how they would actually operate. But ours have been like we have had so little problem, as Evan said. We just, we rake it and spread it out, add some more softwood shavings to it. We have composting worms that live in there. So they're essentially only composting in maybe the top inch or inch and a half of the composting toilet bins. So we've been really pleased with them, and just, we've been scratching our heads with the sustainability coordinator, who you're going to talk to in a couple of weeks, about what we're going to do with these composting toilets to sort of renew them and get started again on our collections.
Well, I'm personally hoping for an update on what's decided, because I personally find compost toilets really mysteriously intriguing. Okay, another question's just come in. Being in a remote community, getting replacement components when things break can be a problem. So how much redundancy do you have in place with the systems, and what replacement parts do you keep on hand?
That's an awesome question in a building like this. So at the end of construction, we had quite a lot of redundant components left, like things like pumps for our pumping water around in our building. So that's one thing that we've recently had to change on our potable water system, was the main pumps that provide pressure throughout. So we did have about 20% redundancy left with us in terms of, you know, carpet and floors and pumps and bits and pieces, and we're definitely running out of those now. And so we're actually doing it more or less on an as needed basis. So rather than having a large pool of inventory on site, we end up spending quite a bit of money and having it flown up to us instead of holding inventory on site. We do operate as a nonprofit organization, as Evan mentioned at the beginning. So we don't necessarily have a lot of money to invest in having an inventory of parts. So we almost deal with it on an as needed basis, and really trying to have a few folks who understand the building. We definitely call it listening to the building. So when you come in the morning, we wander around the building and be like, huh, that doesn't sound right.
Yeah.
So a lot of trying to catch things early on before they become maybe bigger issues.
Yeah, I would probably add two things to that general topic as well. And so like, for example, for myself, like I grew up in Winnipeg and I went to UW, I have an arts degree, and then I came up here like 4 and a bit years ago, and now I know a lot about how to manage a research station and like HVAC and plumbing, and I've been spelunking like under the building with Leanne to figure out a lot of things, and it's a lot of that building management and everything of both this facility we have and the little one, like the old one next door, I should say. It's been great to learn a lot of those things, but the reality is that sometimes Leanne and I and our maintenance person and our sustainability coordinator can't fix a problem or can't wrap our brains around something. And so one of the ways to speak to your question about being remote is that if we needed, for example, like a specific plumber, there is like maybe one plumber in Churchill you can kind of negotiate with if you need to, but if it's a larger job or something kind of tough, you could approach other organizations in Churchill. So we partnered with organizations before where we'll split the cost of a plane ticket for someone to come up for a day or two, and we can host them here very inexpensively and feed them, but just cost sharing has been a really great way for us to also deal with some of those larger, maybe like we need a technician to come up for our generator or something like that. Like our knowledge is pretty good at the building, but there's certain things we just don't know. And our maintenance person doesn't know and all of that. So we're all learning together, but it's been pretty cool to be like, I have an arts degree and can also manage like water and sewage and, you know, HVAC and everything else in the building.
Yes, the things you learn on the job versus what we learn in school. Very real, very real. So can you just share some of the considerations about the foundations in the permafrost? So what's the R value under the building?
Yeah, great question. So I'll maybe take that. So underneath the building, I didn't really have a chance to show you, but if I say freezer panels, I think a lot of people will understand what that is. So underneath the building, there is a short crawl space, and it has freezer panels on the bottom. So the whole building is wrapped with insulation and lifted up off the ground. And Melissa can correct me, but I think that the R value of those is quite high for the crawl space under the building as well. So the building is lifted up off the ground, and the concrete piles go all the way down either to bedrock or to the permafrost. So most of the building is actually, those concrete piles go right down to the bedrock. So when we initially started, this site was a site that had already been disturbed, and one of our previous maintenance folks had indicated that there was probably some waste on the site that could be dealt with. So we excavated actually down to the bedrock. We're able to remove that and then also be able to pour that those concrete piles and forms on the bedrock. And then we backfilled with clean gravel in there to allow the permafrost to grade back in there and give us a very stable platform for the building. So it's a mix of that onto bedrock. There is one hang beam on the end of the building where we couldn't quite tie into bedrock. And then the permafrost in the bedrock and into that gravel as well.
Yeah, I'll just add that, yes, the whole R value is the same sort of all the way around the building. That was kind of the idea, that it all be consistent. And then, so the building's raised so that snow can scour around the building so that you don't get those big high drifts that the polar bears can then walk on top of.
And it works great.
Yeah.
All that discussion about wind modeling was worth it.
All right, so question. Have the renovations in your building influenced the renovations in the community at the center of town?
I would say probably. Up until October of 2019, last year, this was the newest facility, as far as I know, in town. There's since been 2 facilities built by Polar Bears International. I would say we influenced them because they stole the color of our building, for sure. That's an obvious one. It's like IKEA blue with yellow trim. But I would say so. Like, Churchill is certainly a community that shows its age at times. Like, a lot of the infrastructure is older and aging, and certainly the cost to bring materials up here is literally cost prohibitive to build new construction. So I think there's certainly some elements of this facility in town that I would say I've seen in the 2 newest ones, which are very recent, like October and December of 2019. So they're really new. But I would also say that there's probably some locals, like some old school locals, who are like, what the heck is that big blue building out of town doing? Like, it's definitely like, But there's also every guest who comes to this facility, whether it's a researcher for one day or a learner for a week for a program, they're like, wow, like, what an amazing facility and an amazing place. Like, it's probably influenced well beyond just Churchill, I would say. Like, people, like, when we go for walks outside, I'm often like herding cats because people are just taking so many photos of the building from this angle and that angle, and like they want to come underneath. I'm like, sir, that's not safe to do. But there's probably influence well beyond just Churchill, I would say.
I also think it was really interesting when we were building the building. If you can imagine, we poured these concrete piles, and then that happened in the fall time. So that finished around November-ish. And then it was kind of quiet as the season was quite cold. And then in February, these massive glue lamp beams started arriving, and we started constructing in February and into early March. And the structure looked like an upside down arc. So a lot of people in the community were like, definitely, what are you doing out there? So if you could just, I think as sustainable building folks, you can probably imagine that wooden structure being built and then it's slowly being closed in over time. And it's got this curved roof on it. There was a lot of like sort of head scratching, like, what are they doing out there? But definitely lots of interest from the community. And we have a pretty much an open door policy. So they're welcome to come in. That where we started in that large atrium area, they come in, have a seat, grab a cup of coffee, pop into our gift shop if they want to, chat with somebody, or a reception area. You can buy a hoodie. So yeah, we try to maintain a fairly good relationship with the community. All of us live in the community. The staff don't stay out here at the study center. So at the end of the day, we head back to town, and Evan's a volunteer firefighter. I do a lot of safety training in the community. So we're definitely involved in the community. To kind of gets away from your sustainable building question, but I think helps you to think about our relationship, being 25 kilometers out of the town, but still, trying to be part of the community here.
We also have the best commute to work possible.
Yeah,
like, you drive by the Hudson Bay every single day. I've seen dozens of polar bears on the way to work. Like, you can't beat it.
That's so nice. And no, sustainable communities has to be a part of our holistic sustainable thinking. So thanks for bringing that up. Probably our last question, depending on how long you talk for, but can you just tell us a little bit about this facility compared to the one that preceded it? So like, just a little bit like how you saw water usage and things like that happening, like the operation costs, just what was the difference like?
Yeah, so the previous building next door was a part of the Churchill research range. So it was a 50-year-old building. It was built on a concrete pad for the most part, with kind of 2 Butler buildings shoved on either end of it. So it was definitely showing its age, and there were a lot of challenges around flow. And that's why we focused a lot in this talk about, we built this building very intentionally and very specifically to do what we wanted it to do, because we knew from the other building next door that we knew what not to do. I guess, because we'd taken a building and repurposed it into something else, and there were areas that had heat and didn't have heat, and it was a mismatch of things. It definitely was being held together by a lot of tender loving care and probably some duct tape and very kind people. So it was obvious that we needed a new facility and to build one that was purpose built. And as Evan mentioned, you know, we in this building are able to, for 6 months of the year, when we have 80% of our visitors, be able to treat our own drinking water on site and be able to deal with our own waste. So we're able to eliminate a lot of those costs of having to truck, you know, sewer and water back and forth to town to get drinking water, quality water, and to appropriately, you know, get rid of our sewage. So I think just being able to provide our clients, whether they're researchers or educators, with a really great, comfortable, safe place, and it's hard to put a price on those things, as well as also the utility costs, being able to upgrade those as well. I used to say, especially at this time of year in the spring, in my office in the old building, so I've been here for 18 years, so I saw us through this process. It would sometimes be like 8 degrees in my office. So literally you wouldn't take your like snow pants off even in the spring. In the springtime, you'd work at that. So being able to come to work and it's, you know, 16 or 18 is awesome. So just little things like that make a big difference.
Totally. So 2 other quick questions, hopefully. So somebody just was asking about if there was any energy modeling done on the transportation mode for getting the construction materials up there.
That's a great question. Maybe Melissa, do you know if there was?
No, not on the transportation. I mean, we had an energy model for the actual building, but we looked at like regional issues with the materials, but we didn't model it for energy.
Sweet.
I have to run into another meeting, but great to see you guys.
Yeah, thanks, Melissa.
Thanks for the tour.
Yeah, thanks for being here for contributions. So useful. And then finally, tell us the truth. All of these glue-lam beams, sorry, not beans. Have there been any like issues with them, given the fact that there's the cold, the humidity? Have they shrunk? Have they cracked? How are they doing? How are they holding up?
Yeah, great question. So we were actually just looking to see if there's any cracks in the ones in here that we could show you. So definitely the changes in humidity are the big one. We don't have big changes in temperature in the building. Like right now we keep it at around 16.5 in the building, and like maybe the warmest it might get up is towards 28 on a really warm summer day or a stretch of warm summer days, but the humidity changes are pretty huge. So we've actually been monitoring some of the cracks in some of the glue lamps to see if they're changing over time. So there was a lot of cracking in the first sort of 18 months of the building, especially in some of the curved ones for sure. And one of the things that we do note is like the ones that are in the dorm room, sometimes the cracks, you know, transmit sound. So those are ones that we're, you know, kind of investigating a little bit more with Melissa. She gave us a good protocol on measuring the cracks in the glue lamps and kind of keeping track of them to see if they are expanding with time, and then coming up maybe with a couple of solutions. So yes, they have cracked, mostly due to humidity, but a lot of that occurred in that first 18 months.
Fascinating, fascinating. Well, I'm sure there are plenty of other questions, so if you have the moment to just like answer one final like little quick question here, do you think that you can talk to us a bit about the renovation schedule? Like, do you have certain things that are checked on a regular basis, like that sort of thing?
Yeah, really great question. I think it's one of the big challenges in a nonprofit is having people who are dedicated to the building and kind of keeping on top of some of those maintenance issues. So Melissa mentioned Richard Lay. He's he was the engineer who designed all the HVAC and a lot of the sort of plumbing guts of the building. So he's been fantastic. He's now retired, but he loves the study center and his time that he got to spend here in Churchill. And so he's been really helpful to us to make sure that we're kind of staying on top of some of the building maintenance issues, because it's a huge challenge for us. And I think whoever asked that question, that's a really great question to ask. And it's been nice having, Melissa is also working on building the design for the Churchill Marine Observatory here in Churchill, and has been a fantastic resource for us. And I don't think that's a normal procedure, that the people who design your building like call you up and ask how things are going like 9 years down the line. And you know, Richard actually came here and volunteered his time last year in May to walk around the building with us and look at some of the systems to help optimize them. So I guess I would just say, make good friends with those people. Make sure they like you, because that's been really helpful to us, because it's so hard to do those things remotely, and we not necessarily did a great job of it for sure, but trying to work on that so that we have a building that will last into the future.
Amazing. Well, with that, we're going to wrap it up. Thank you both so much for the time and the energy that you took sharing this with us. We're getting a lot of positive responses in the chat saying big thank yous and how much people learned and how much people appreciated this. And I just want to echo all of that. I also want to thank Melissa from Prairie Architects that she was here on the call and was able to like throw in a few things to add to our learning, which was really useful. And also a shout out to Duxton Windows, who helped sponsor this whole tour business, and who apparently also was some of the folks who put in some of those windows, those triple pane windows that we saw there. So thanks to everyone who was here and participated today. Reminder that we're having these all through June. So next week is an earthship, then a prefabrication facility in Ontario, I believe. And then finally, we're going to be back here in Churchill to see some more of the cool buildings that they have there in the Rocket Greens. So keep an eye open, buy your tickets, tell people about them. Like, let's celebrate these sustainable buildings here in Manitoba. So thanks, everybody. Take care.
Thanks, Laura.
Take care.
You're welcome. Bye.